The Cipher Brief, because national security is everyone's business.
Back to Ukraine now. I'd like to welcome a friend of mine, Edward Marshall, who by day is the global head of family office at Denton's, which everybody who works at Denton's always has to say the world's largest law firm. And in his spare time, he is co-founder of Help Ukraine 22. It's a nonprofit organization that is a rapid response humanitarian aid project that was initially focused on evacuations in the most horrific places around Ukraine and is now providing humanitarian and medical supplies and is looking to actually help with a lot of things like mental health issues, which I can only imagine, Eddie, is in great demand. You've had a long history in Ukraine yourself, including prior US government service there. I'm going to turn the floor over to you now, if you don't mind, to introduce our next speaker. But first, I'd like you to brief us for just a couple of minutes on the humanitarian situation right now in Ukraine.
Sure. Thank you, Suzanne. And thank you for your guests for focusing on this area and what's going on. I think certainly the situation on the humanitarian side has been evolving. I think that's a good way to describe it. Gone are the sort of 10-kilometer long lines of people trying to leave Ukraine and have been replaced by 20-kilometer lines of trucks trying to leave and both get into Ukraine on the supply chain side. In the beginning, it was really focused from a lot of international organizations and Ukrainian organizations themselves of trying to rescue and get people out of some pretty nasty situations across the country, which still exist today, and those efforts that are there. That was later supplanted in the spring with getting resupply of getting medicines and critical goods all across the country. As part of it, whether those are IFACs or medical supplies or just food in different parts of Ukraine, to really a rebuilding type of process, whether it's the physical side, where we see all the damaged buildings, the housing. It gets certainly very cold here in the fall and in the winter, so there's certainly a situation of people looking to how to rebuild on the housing side and to provide shelter for families that are displaced within the country and are also coming back. There's infrastructure damage that is being replaced, as well as, in addition to the stories on agriculture and other industries that are making headlines in that space. But there's also areas that are less visible, and that's certainly in the mental space, and where that's taken a large toll from PTSD and other areas that there are going to be a lasting effect across the board. I think in summary, a lot of great work is being done, by the Ukrainian government, by Ukrainian organizations, everyday Ukrainians. A great story that someone sent me a picture of their refrigerator needed a repairman. So one of the local repair experts in that area came in their full outfit. They're part of the territorial defense unit. They're by day they're the repairman for that refrigerator. By night they're guarding their city and their part of town, as well as international organizations pitching in as part of it. I mean, if Ukrainians have shown the world anything, they're adaptive and resilient. But this conflict is far from over. So with that, thank you, Suzanne, and I'd love to transition and have the privilege of introducing our next speaker. That's Viktor Zhora. Viktor is the Deputy Chairman and Chief Digital Transformation Officer at the State Service of Special Communication and Information Protection of Ukraine, CIP if you're playing the acronym game. He holds a master's in applied mathematics and a bachelor's in computer science. Viktor is also the author of nearly 50 scientific publications in the information security space. Viktor has been a member of many organizing committees in Ukraine and around cyber conferences across the country. He's got over 20 years of experience as an architect and project management in his field. Before government service, he was a co-founder of an information security company based in Ukraine. At CIP, Viktor supervises digital transformation and cybersecurity projects, CERT UA, and the State Cyber Protection Center. Leading today's discussion with Viktor is Christopher Bing. Christopher is the cybersecurity reporter at Reuters. So I'll turn it over to you, Christopher.
Thank you. Viktor, I was just saying thank you for being here today. I'm really excited for this discussion. As a member of the press, I also want to say I really have appreciated how you and your office have been transparent and open in talking about the cyber conflict that's been occurring in Ukraine since the start of the war. I think it's been really helpful for public, for the private sector, for people trying to analyze what's happening. I think perhaps to get the conversation started, I was hoping to ask you about the current threat landscape in Ukraine. What are you seeing today?
We continue observing growing aggression in cyberspace. In the last 8 years, since we are facing a hybrid war from 2014, which started from annexation of Crimea and the occupation of the eastern part of Donbass. First strikes in cyber war happened in May 2014 during presidential elections. And after that, the hybrid war, which has two components, conventional components and cyber components, was lasting these 8 years. But in the beginning of the year, we faced new challenges in cyber security. More than 70 government websites have been faced on January 14th, and it was followed with huge DDoS attacks. We basically preceded the full-scale invasion on February 24th. And after that, we see continuous aggression, which we basically can call war on the battlefield, and continuous cyber attacks from the Russian side in cyberspace. So from this point of view, it seems to be the first war with conventional and cyber components running simultaneously. And since more than 2 countries are involved in this cyber war, not only Ukraine is targeted, but other countries as well, we can consider it the first global cyber war. And we were aware of this risk. We were aware of upcoming war, and we started preparation, very active preparation several months prior to war, focusing on protecting of energy infrastructure. But having this experience of countering cyber threats from 2015, especially after destructive attacks such as Black Energy, Indestroyer, and the most destructive cyber attack in history called NotPetya in 2017, we started building our national cybersecurity system. And we did it together with our partners from the United States, from European Union, in the frameworks of several international technical systems projects. We were able to build capacities. We were able to prepare workforce, to improve collaboration between cybersecurity agencies. And these are the facts, together with others, that allow us being resilient in these challenging times of the last almost 6 months of war and continuous cyber attacks against our infrastructure.
Yeah, Viktor, that was a great overview of the preparation and what's been occurring recently. And in the early days of the conflict, there was a lot of press coverage about destructive style attacks, destroying data. And my question was whether that type of activity is still occurring.
I don't know.
I got the question. I think Christopher. First of all, we understand that starting of aggression after almost 4-year absence of destructive attacks from not better time, but continuously sending phishing emails, targeting government networks, etc., and following with a massive breach of government websites and destroying of some IT infrastructures in Ukrainian ministries and organizations. The attackers aim to, first of all, provide subversion and sow instability and disinformation. They were focused on several objectives, in my opinion. First of all, is subversion and disinformation. Then indication of some kind of supremacy in cyberspace, indicating that they can do everything, and the government has nothing to do with these attacks and cannot protect data of Ukrainian citizens. And finally, that was a test how Ukrainian society would consider these cyber attacks. And perhaps they were probing grounds before invasion and following the use of more sophisticated cyber weapons than during the initial phase with this defacement and DDoS attacks in January and February. There was a destructive one of the most dangerous attacks in the first hours of war, so-called Wiresat hack, when attackers were able to disrupt a connection that was used by Ukrainian armed forces. I mean, the satellite component. But in the following days, we saw a serious growth of number of cyber attacks and cyber incidents, but there were no very sophisticated attacks. And there are some reasons for that, mostly because the density of operation in days of war require more and more attacks, and which at the same time require time and human resources to get prepared for these attacks. There are other reasons, and we can discuss it later. But they used this first month of war to switch to more sophisticated and disruptive attacks. For instance, attack on Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or disrupting telecom services in the biggest Ukrainian land telecom provider, Telecom, or attempting targeting a Ukrainian regional power distribution company with the modernized industrial code, which could be one of the most destructive attacks in history, impacting up to 2 million people with the absence of power, making a blackout in the whole region. And thankfully, we were able, together with our partners, to prevent this destructive cyber attack. Nowadays, they continue seeking for gaps and vulnerabilities in our networks in order to get initial access, and then decide what to do next. And I would subdivide this operation to 3 groups. One is focusing on gaining access and exfiltration of data for a potential use in their intelligence, for their intelligence needs, their filtration operations on occupied territories, etc., etc. The next group is used for can be described as attempt of hijacking of air, some web resources, putting propaganda on them or on these resources, and this is exactly subversion and disinformation objectives. And the third group it is most supportive to military operations and providing direct impact. So it's disruptive attacks, use of wipers on Ukrainian networks, wiping of data, and disrupting services which are offered by these IT infrastructures in government organizations or commercial companies.
So I like how you organize that in terms of the espionage teams, the disruptive teams, and the disinformation teams. Are you still seeing the disruptive on critical infrastructure networks in Ukraine, or has the conflict turned to a point more disinformation?
Well, hopefully I got it. We continue registering new cyber incidents almost every day, and from the beginning of the year, we registered more than 1,600 major cyber incidents, and we identified more than 10 examples of malicious code, basically wipers that were used for deleting data in networks, deleting logs in complex operations, etc., etc. And that means that Russians continue to improve these wipers, to develop new ones, and to seek, as I said earlier, opportunities for using them in order to make direct impacts on Ukrainian networks and amplify the overall impact of kinetic operations based for Ukraine.
What has the partnership been like with the U.S. government, especially the likes of Cyber Command? Recently, I know Cyber Command came out publicly and discussed that there's been information sharing on malware between the Ukrainian government and the U.S. government. How has that partnership been helpful in terms of domestic defense?
First of all, I would like to thank our colleagues from U.S. government, from our partner agency, from commercial sector as well. The assistance that we continue getting from our colleagues globally is hard to overestimate, and this allows us to continue be resilient during the war. And we subdivide again to two phases. First phase prior to war, and there were a number of projects. For instance, USAID fund project Cybersecurity, critical infrastructure in Ukraine, which helps us strengthen our cybersecurity system and prepare workforce for countering this sort of threats. This was very helpful, but from the first days of war, we were offered a lot of different kind of assistance, starting from supplying of hardware and software, cloud environments for our backups, for our government data to be stored for the period of war. We were provided with threat intelligence and a lot of offerings of consultancy services, consultancy assistance for our commercial companies, for our public sector, for our critical infrastructure. And that is done and continues to be done in cooperation with the U.S. government agencies like CISA. During my previous visit to the United States, me and my colleague General Putti and January Israeli signed a memorandum of understanding between CFB and CISA, and we are very similar in functions that we perform on behalf of our government for citizens and for community. So we had a fruitful cooperation before, but this MOU indicates a new level of partnerships and trust. We have close ties with law enforcement. CIP, which I represent here, is not a law enforcement agency, but my colleagues from Security Service of Ukraine or Cyber Police have close ties with colleagues from the United States. And we participated for the second time in Cyber Flag initiative recently. So I can say that within the framework of this Cyber Flag community and initiative, we are able to communicate to and cooperate with U.S. Cyber Command, as well as many other partners in the United States. And what is most important, we have direct relations with global IT providers, which continue supporting us not only in infrastructure, but again, sending us some tips on cyber threats, having great visibility on telemetry in Ukrainian networks, and alerting us on some malicious activity, enabling us response very quickly and prevent cyber attacks in a way it happened in the beginning of April in this regional power distribution company.
The key question for the conflict from the very beginning had been, what impact was there going to be globally outside of the U.S. government was shielding up, worried about potential Russian aggression abroad. There was fear that another NotPetya style event could occur, affecting U.S. companies or European companies. But we haven't quite seen that. What is your analysis? Why do you think that is? Is it because these partners and companies have done such a good job of defense? Is it that the Russians have not had the appetite to conduct those operations? What do you think is occurring?
Thank you. This is a great question. And openly ask this question, and I understand that the world was expecting for more serious aggression because of estimating of Russian real attacking potential. But we see the same on the battlefield. We continue fighting against the so-called second army of the world, and hopefully we're quite successful. And I have no doubt that with the support of our partners, Ukraine will prevail. Hopefully soon. But back to cybersecurity. Yes, Russian military hackers from GRU, FSB, SVR, and other structures have been threatening the whole world for last 15 years, starting from their attack on Estonia. And that was an opinion that perhaps Russia is kind of red button and switch off the whole country or disrupt communications or critical infrastructure. But this doesn't happen, and I don't think that they don't have appetite for this. I'm confident that if they had this red button real, they would obviously use it in first phase of war, since I don't see any reasons for waiting for this magic moment. And I can explain it in several topics. The first I've already highlighted. I mean that when you have 8 years, when you have a lot of budgets, when you have human resource to invent new cyber weapons, to get prepared for new operations, you have time. It's easy to spend this time developing tools like NotPetya or Industroyer and pen test it in Ukraine and in other countries like testing ground. But during the war, you require these operations every day, and we understand that these resources are limited. At the same time, it seems to me that, as I indicated before, cyber operations continue being supportive to Kinetic, since we cannot compare the overall impact of cyber operations to the impact which Kinetic operations can provide. So when you have right to send missiles to shell Ukrainian cities, residential quarters, hospitals, schools, and universities, perhaps you don't require sophisticated cyber weapons. So you can provide more destructive impact with the use of conventional weapons. Then we understand that perhaps Russians were rather busy with protecting of their own assets, and perhaps these offensive, especially the attackers, switch to defensive tasks because of being targeted by a huge crowd of volunteers from all around the world, which gathered to make this response to Russian cyber aggression against Ukraine and against other countries. So I suppose that they continue being very busy with that. Additionally, we understand that there's a huge intellectual flow out from Russia. That means that in case they even require new human resources to be engaged to their attacking units, it's difficult to find them since most of the professionals are smart enough to leave the country and stay away of this aggression. Additionally, I understand that the instrument of sanctions is rather effective, and the Russians are limited with ability of building of infrastructures for offensive operations, since they require software, hardware, or usually their blocks are abroad, and it's complicated to keep these operations covered since or they are monitored by foreign intelligence. And finally, it seems to me that they burned some assets before the war, and it was difficult for them to regain them. That can explain that. So they continue seeking for new organizations, for new gaps in security, for new vulnerabilities, to target them, to make initial access to networks, and then decide what to do next.
Yeah, those factors between the brain drain, engineering, sanction, affecting the ability to access commercial software products and services that may be used in offensive operations, and then the network of volunteers that appear to be conducting hacking operations in Russia is probably pushing some of the offensive talent in Russia to defense. A story that I'm not sure how many people in the audience have been following very closely has been this this disinformation, this hack and leak activity that's been occurring across Europe among some of Ukraine's closest allies. Like in Poland, there has been news of hacking against politicians, then leaking of their emails to embarrass them. In the UK, there was hacking of prominent former government officials and leaking of their communications. Both of those operations have been subsequently attributed to Belarus and Russia. It is a little bit reminiscent of the 2016 DNC hack and leaks that we know the Russians conducted now. What do you make of this activity aimed at allies of Ukraine and designed around hack and leak? Does it surprise you? Have you been following it closely?
Well, sure. Before I start answering this question, I forgot to highlight hopefully talent and ability of our cyber defenders that prevent success of Russian attackers. So that perhaps what the sound factor that can explain the overall fall of Russian attacking potential in cyberspace. Back to your question and these threats and issues that our allies are facing with we should understand that Ukraine isn't the only target, and it's difficult to relocate armies from eastern part of Ukraine and south of Ukraine to other countries and to other battlefields. But it's very easy to do in cyberspace. Today you're attacking Ukrainian organization. Tomorrow you switch to Polish or to infrastructures in Baltic countries. And we know there are some groups called Killnet or Hacknet or other groups that are gathered in Telegram channels. And we know that there are no actors, real actors, standing behind these Telegram channels. But these are actors that serve as the voice of real offensive units of FSB and GRU, etc. And Killnet declared that they will target a list of countries, 10 countries, starting from Ukraine, but following with Poland, with Baltic countries, United Kingdom, and many other countries that are in list. That means that they're all under threat. And we should be united. We should create some kind of cyber coalition and exchange knowledge, exchange threat information. And Ukraine wants to contribute to safety of our allies and partners to create this kind of shield for all democracies, for all democratic world, and being secure against this aggression. So again, cybersecurity is a global task, and there is no country that can be protected by themselves. We should be united and should help each other, staying strong and staying cyber resilient.
Viktor, I think that's a great place to end our conversation today. I want to thank you again for joining in the conversation. And earlier, I'd also said, I really appreciate the openness and transparency in which you and your colleagues have spoken about the cyber conflict in Ukraine. It's been very beneficial as a journalist, and I know other people in the audience appreciate it. So thank you again.
Christopher, thank you so much for moderating this, and thank you both for your patience as we work through the technical issue on this. I really want to thank our team behind the scenes who have really scrambled. Thank you, Brad. Hats off. Viktor, before you leave, if you don't mind, I have one more question from our colleague David Sanger at the New York Times. David says, clearly Ukraine is also conducting offensive cyber operations against Russian targets. Tell us how you're making judgments about what are legitimate targets and what are not, and what kind of norms you think that those rules, if they exist, are creating for the use of cyber in an ongoing conflict. He'd like to know if you consult regularly with President Zelensky's office on this topic.
Well, thank you. We should clearly define what is Ukraine, these conclusions. And since Ukraine does not conduct any offensive operations officially, but there are a lot of them that are being conducted by community, by volunteers, not only Ukraine, by the way, but they are joined with their foreign colleagues, mostly conducting DDoS attacks, which can be considered a kind of offensive operation. So I wouldn't perhaps endorse from a government point of view these attacks, but as I said many times before, as a citizen, I'm grateful to all the people that are doing something to weaken our enemy. So perhaps the overall code of conduct and legislation will be changed after this war, since every person has a right for justice, and when global order, global rules, and justice is broken, and you cannot find truth and justice, perhaps people should have right to fight for their rights, and in cyberspace as well. So again, volunteer activity identifies targets by themselves, and it seems to me when we obtain this functionality, I mean offensive capacity officially, there will be another topic to discuss, and we'll see how it's managed in other countries. But in current situation, we continue preparing for obtaining these capacities because presidential decree of last August, 1 year ago. But IT Army of Ukraine and other groups, they join voluntarily, and they select targets by themselves. And finally, we are not endorsing, but we are thankful to all these people who voluntarily get together and continue decreasing ability of our enemy to attack Ukraine and our partners.
We really appreciate your time, and just echoing what my colleague Christopher Bing said at the beginning of your conversation, really appreciate the transparency. I think you answered that question in a more honest way than maybe I would have expected. We understand that Ukraine is operating in a whole different environment. And of course, Ukraine has always been on the front lines of cyber when it comes to these things. So I appreciate your comments that we may have to revisit policies after this. It echoes a lot of things that we've said in earlier sessions today. Ukraine is really teaching the world a lot of things about what our new future is going to look like. Sir, I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience as we work through our technical issues on this end. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you for questions, for your Susan, Christopher, and for